on a small, obscure world, somewhere in the middle of nowhere in particular. Nowhere, that is, that could ever be found, since it is protected by a vast field of unprobability to which only 6 men in this galaxy have a key. It was raining. It was bucketing down, and had been for hours. It beat the top of the sea into a mist. It pounded the trees. It churned and slopped a stretch of scrubby land near the sea into a mud bath. The rain pelted and danced on the corrugated iron roof of the small shack that stood in the middle of this patch of scrubby land. It obliterated the small, rough pathway that led from the shack down to the seashore and smashed apart the neat piles of interesting shells which had been placed there. The noise of the rain on the roof of the shack was deafening within, but went largely unnoticed by its occupant, whose attention was otherwise engaged. He was a tall, shambling man with rough straw-colored hair that was damp from the leaking roof. His clothes were shabby, his back was hunched, and his eyes, though open, seemed closed. In his shack was an old beaten-up armchair, an old scratch table, an old mattress, some cushions, and a stove that was small but warm. There was also an old, slightly weather-beaten cat, and this was currently the focus of the man's attention. He bent his shambling form over it. "Pussy, pussy, pussy," he said. "Coochie, coochie, coochie, coo. Pussy want a fish? Nice piece of fish. Pussy want it?" The cat seemed undecided on the matter. It pawed rather condescendingly at the piece of fish the man was holding out, and then got distracted by a piece of dust on the floor. "Pussy not eat his fish? Pussy get thin and waste away, I think," said the man. Doubt crept into his voice. "I imagine this is what will happen," he said. "But how can I tell?" "Pussy think," he said, "eat fish or not eat fish. I think it's better if I don't get involved," he sighed. "I think fish is nice, but I think rain is wet, so who am I to judge?" He left the fish on the floor for the cat and retired to his seat. "I seem to see you eating it," he said at last, as the cat exhausted the entertainment possibilities of the speck of dust and pounced onto the fish. "I like it when I see you eat the fish," said the man, "because in my mind, you will waste away if you don't." He picked up from the table a piece of paper and the stub of a pencil. He held one in one hand and the other in the other, and experimented with the different ways of bringing them together. He tried holding the pencil under the paper, then over the paper, then next to the paper. He tried wrapping the paper round the pencil. He tried rubbing the stubby end of the pencil against the paper, and then he tried rubbing the sharp end of the pencil against the paper. It made a mark, and he was delighted with the discovery, as he was every day. He picked up another piece of paper from the table. This had a crossword on it. He studied it briefly and filled in a couple of clues before losing interest. He tried sitting on one of his hands and was intrigued by the feeling of the bones of his hip. "Fish come from far away," he said. "Or so I'm told. Or so I imagine I'm told. When the man come, or in my mind the men come in their 6 black ships, do they come in your mind too? What do you see, pussy?" He looked at the cat, which was more concerned with getting the fish down as rapidly as possible than it was with these speculations. "And then I hear their questions. Do you hear their questions? What do their voices mean to you? Perhaps you think they're just singing songs to you." He reflected on this and saw the flaw in his supposition. "Perhaps they are singing songs to you," he said, "and I just think they're asking me questions." He paused again. Sometimes he would pause for days just to see what it was like. "Do you think they came today?" he said. "I do. There's mud on the floor, cigarettes and whiskey on the table, fish on a plate for you, and a memory of them in my mind. Hardly conclusive evidence, I know, but all evidence is circumstantial. And look what else they've left me. He reached over the table and pulled some things off of it. Crosswords, dictionaries, and a calculator. He played with the calculator for an hour, whilst the cat went to sleep and the rain outside continued to pour. Eventually, he put the calculator aside. I think I must be right in thinking that they asked me questions, he said. To come all that way and leave all these things for the privilege of singing songs to you would be a very strange behavior, or so it seems to me. Who can tell? Who can tell? From the table, he picked up a cigarette and lit it with the split of the stove. He inhaled deeply and sat back. I think I saw another ship in the sky today, he said, at last. A big white one. I've never seen a big white one. Just the 6 black ones, and the 6 green ones, and the others who say they come from so far away. Never a big white one. Perhaps 6 small black ones can look like one big white one at certain times. Perhaps I would have a glass of whiskey. Yes, that seems more likely. He stood up and found a glass that was lying on the floor by the mattress. He poured in a measure from his whiskey bottle. He sat again. Perhaps some other people are coming to see me, he said. 100 yards away, pelted by torrential rain, lay the Heart of Gold. Its hatchway opened, and 3 figures emerged, huddling into themselves to keep the rain off their faces. In there, shouted Trillian, above all the noise of the rain. Yes, said Zarniwoop. That shack. Yes. Weird, said Zaphod. But it is in the middle of nowhere, said Trillian. We must have come to the wrong place. You can't rule the universe from a shack. They hurried through the pouring rain and arrived wet through at the door. They knocked. They shivered. The door opened. Hello, said the man. Ah, excuse me, said Zarniwoop. I have reason to believe. Do you rule the universe? Said Zaphod. The man smiled at him. I try not to, he said. Are you wet? Zaphod looked at him in astonishment. Wet? He cried. Doesn't it look as if we're wet? That's how it looks to me, said the man. But how you feel about it might be an altogether different matter. If you feel warmth makes you dry, you'd better come in. They went in. They looked around the tiny shack, Zarniwoop with slight distaste, Trillian with interest, Zaphod with delight. Hey, said Zaphod. What's your name? The man looked at him doubtfully. I don't know. Why? Do you think I should have one? It seems very odd to give a bundle of vague sensory perceptions a name. He invited Trillian to sit in the chair. He sat on the edge of the chair. Zarniwoop leaned shiftily against the table, and Zaphod lay on the mattress. Wowee, said Zaphod. The seat of power. He tickled the cat. Listen, said Zarniwoop. I must ask you some questions. All right, said the man kindly. Can you sing to my cat if you like? Would he like that? Asked Zaphod. You better ask him, said the man. Does he talk? Said Zaphod. I have no memory of him talking, said the man, but I'm very unreliable. Zarniwoop pulled some notes out of a pocket. Now, he said, you do rule the universe, do you? How can I tell? Said the man. Zarniwoop ticked off a note on the paper. How long have you been doing this? Said the man. This is a question about the past, is it? Zarniwoop looked at him in puzzlement. This wasn't exactly what he had been expecting. Yes, he said. How can I tell? Said the man. That the past isn't a fiction designed to account for the discrepancies between my immediate physical sensations and my state of mind. Zarniwoop stared at him, the steam beginning to rise from his soddened clothes. "So you answer all questions like this," he said. The man answered quickly. "I say what occurs to me to say when I think I hear people saying things. More I cannot say." Zaphod laughed happily. "I'll drink to that," he said, and pulled out a bottle of Jank's spirit. He leapt up and handed the bottle to the ruler of the universe, who took it with pleasure. "Good on you, great ruler," he said. "Tell it like it is." "No, listen to me," said Zarniwoop. "People come to you, do they? In ships?" "I think so," said the man. He handed the bottle to Trillian. "And they ask you," said Zarniwoop, "to make decisions for them? About people's lives, about worlds, about economies, about wars, about everything that goes on out there in the universe?" "Out there?" said the man. "Out where?" "Out there," said Zarniwoop, pointing at the door. "How can you tell there's anything out there?" said the man politely. The doors closed. The rain continued to pound the roof. Inside the shack was warm. "But you know there's a whole universe out there," cried Zarniwoop. "You can't dodge your responsibilities by saying they don't exist." The ruler of the universe thought for a long while Zarniwoop quivered with anger. "You're very sure of your facts," he said at last. "I couldn't trust the thinking of a man who takes the universe, if there is one, for granted." Zarniwoop still quivered, but was silent. "I only decide upon my universe," continued the man quietly. "My universe is my eyes and my ears. Anything else is heresy." "But don't you believe in anything?" The man shrugged and picked up his cat. "I don't understand what you mean," he said. "You don't understand that what you decide in this shack of yours affects the lives and fates of millions of people. This is all monstrously wrong." "I don't know. I've never met all these people you speak of, and neither, I suspect, have you. They only exist in words we hear. It is folly to say you know what is happening to other people. Only they know if they exist. They have their own universes of their own eyes and ears." Trillian said, "I think I'm just popping outside for a moment." She left and walked into the rain. "Do you believe other people exist?" insisted Zarniwoop. "I have no opinion. How can I say?" "I'd better see what's up with Trillian," said Zaphod, and slipped out. Outside, he said to her, "I think the universe is in pretty good hands, yeah?" "Very good," said Trillian. They walked off into the rain. Inside, Zarniwoop continued, "But don't you understand that people live or die on your word?" The ruler of the universe waited for as long as he could. When he heard the faint sound of the ship's engine starting, he spoke to cover it. "It's nothing to do with me," he said. "I'm not involved with people. The Lord knows I'm not a cruel man." "Ah!" barked Zarniwoop. "You say, the Lord? You believe in something." "My cat," said the man benignly, picking it up and stroking it. "I call him the Lord, and I'm kind to him." "All right," said Zarniwoop, pressing home his point. "How do you know he exists? How do you know he knows you to be kind, or enjoys what he thinks of you as your kindness?" "I don't," said the man with a smile. "I have no idea. It merely pleases me to behave in a certain way to what appears to be a cat. Do you behave any differently? Please, I think I'm tired. Zarniwoop heaved a thoroughly dissatisfied sigh and looked about. Where are the other two? He said suddenly. What other two? Said the ruler of the universe, settling back into his chair and refilling his whiskey glass. Beeble Brox and the girl! The two who were here. I remember no one. The past is a fiction to account for— Stuff it! Snapped Zarniwoop, and ran out into the rain. There was no ship. The rain continued to churn the mud. There was no sign to show where the ship had been. He hollered into the rain. He turned and ran back to the shack and found it locked. The ruler of the universe dozed lightly in his chair. After a while, he played with the pencil and paper again, and was delighted when he discovered how to make a mark with the one on the other side. Various noises continued outside, but he didn't know whether they were real or not. He then talked to his table for a week to see how it would react. The stars came out that night, dazzling in their brilliance and clarity. Ford and Arthur had walked more miles than they had any means of judging, and finally stopped to rest. The night was cool and balmy, the air pure, the sub-ether sensomatic totally silent. A wonderful stillness hung over the world, a magical calm which, combined with the soft fragrance of woods, the quiet chatter of insects, and the brilliant light of the stars, soothed the jangled spirits. Even Ford Prefect, who had seen more worlds than he could count on a long afternoon, was moved to wonder if this was the most beautiful he had ever seen. All that day he had passed through rolling green hills and valleys, richly covered with grasses, wild-scented flowers, and tall, thickly-leaved trees. The sun had warmed them. Light breezes had kept them cool, and Ford Prefect had checked his sub-ether sensomatic at less and less frequent intervals, and had exhibited less and less annoyance at its continued silence. He was beginning to think he liked it here. Cool though the night air was, they slept soundly and comfortably in the open, and awoke a few hours later with the light dewfall, feeling refreshed but hungry. Ford had stuffed some small rolls into his satchel at Millway's, and they breakfasted off those before moving on. So far they had wandered purely at random, but now they struck out firmly eastward, feeling that if they were going to explore this world, they should have some clear idea of where they had come from and where they were going. Shortly before noon, they had their first indication that the world that they had landed on was not an uninhabited one. A half-glimpsed face amongst the trees, watching them. It vanished at the moment they both saw it, but the image they were both left with was of a humanoid creature, curious to see them, but not alarmed. Half an hour later, they glimpsed another such face, and 10 minutes after that, another.
I hope you'll join us at the restaurant at the end of the universe when the next chapter drops very soon.